Hello and welcome to my iRacing circuit guide for the Porsche GT3 Cup at the Hockenheimring. This is a qualifying lap using iRacing's provided qualifying setup. The only change I've made, really important change, and you can do this in the fixed setup races, is my brake bias. I've gone 2 clicks forward on the brake bias because I found that the default setting, I was struggling a lot with rear locking. And so by going 2 clicks forward, I've helped to stabilize the rear under braking, which has improved my braking efficiency, but also, the car behaves and hooks up a lot better on corner entry as well. So 2 clicks forward on the brake bias, I found made a massive difference to my lap time and how I was able to control the car on corner entry. So 100% recommend doing that. Right, coming up to turn 1. Tricky corner, high speed. So first thing, maximize your turning radius by using all of this outside curb on entry. Very important that you're doing this and using all the track available, especially in a high speed corner. Use all the track available. I'm applying the brakes. I don't have a specific braking reference, but I'm about 80 meters here. So I'm imagining, here's 50, here's 100, 80 is going to be about here. So that's where I'm going to hit the brakes. It's not a very heavy brake. You do want to carry some speed into the corner. It's high speed. You don't want to sort of be doing slowing down and speeding up too much. You want to be keeping your speed as consistent as possible, because that keeps the car as stable as possible and the aero platform as stable as possible, which really allows you to make the most of the car's downforce. So all the way up, 80 meters. Now here, I've got 2 references here, one for the apex and one for the throttle. So in terms of apex reference, right now I'm aiming for my outside wheel to be just missing this orange curb, my outside wheel. Yes, I'm basically cutting the corner. I'm aiming for my outside wheel to get as close to this orange curb as possible without hitting it. But I'm also, where there's just after, see this curb on the inside here? I'm aiming to start applying throttle when I'm in line with that. So I've got 2 references, apex and throttle reference. Very early throttle. I'm applying the throttle well before I get to the apex. But that's really important for this corner, because as you jump over this curb on the inside, the car's going to it's going to unsettle the car a little bit, obviously, because it's a fairly decent bump. So by leaning on the throttle so early, you're maximizing your exit speed, which is brilliant, but you're also keeping the car more stable as you go over the curb. So, like that. And then for the exit, track limits are somewhere, don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly certain track limits are along the edge of this green here. But then they sort of start to come in a bit as the curb gets smaller. So if I show you on the sort of overhead view quickly, here. So track limits are somewhere close to something like this, following this green line, and then sort of, I think, like joining up somewhere here, right? So that's what I imagine the track limits are, and it works for me. In reality, it's probably something slightly different because iRacing doesn't tell me. It would normally tell me here, but it doesn't. But that's what I've figured out is a sort of rough approximation of the track limits on exit. So make sure you use as much of that as you can. So to recap for turn 1, just run through. Just notice how early I am on throttle. That's the key for this corner. Don't over push the entry. So don't over slow the car, but also don't over push the entry. Focus on gently squeezing the brakes at 80 meters and making sure you're starting to apply the throttle well before you get to the apex, and maximize your use of all the curbing. That's how you quick through turn 1. Coming into turn 2, another corner where I don't have a specific braking reference, because 150 is slightly too early and sort of the edge of this guardrail is a bit too late. So I imagine that I'm going halfway between the two. So something like this. Okay, so halfway between 150 and the guardrail has worked for me for braking. In terms of track usage on entry, I don't recommend trying to use this curb, because if you're braking in a straight line, you're on the brakes, on the brakes, on the brakes. To use this curb, you're going to have to like maneuver the car onto it, which is just not a good idea. You don't want to be doing things like that while you're on the brakes. So just follow the white line on braking, okay? Shifting down to second gear. And my reference for throttle. So in terms of throttle reference, I'm aiming to be starting to apply the throttle by, where this orange curb starts on the inside. You don't want to hit the orange curb. It unsettles the car too much. And at that point, you want to be on the throttle anyway. And when you're applying the throttle, you need the car to be stable. Because if the car's not stable, you can't apply the throttle in anything that remotely resembles an efficient manner. So make sure here, so start of this orange curb, applying the throttle. Just don't use the orange curb. Use all the blue and white. This is fine. Just not this bit. Okay. Down to second gear. Again, focus on early throttle. It's a long straight after this corner. The exit is so much more important than carrying entry speed. Focus on the exit. Do not overpush the entry. And then on exit, you want to be exiting this corner about two-thirds of the way across. Here. So you've got, 1/3 of the track here, 2/3 here. That's sort of where you want the car to be positioned on exit, because that's the best trade-off between the speed you carry through the first apex and being able to open up the second apex onto the straight. Anywhere out here, and you're going to have to lift the throttle to get through here. And anywhere here, sure, you'll make this part fine onto the straight, no worries. But to be here, you've gone way too slow through the previous corner. So 2/3 of the way across works well. Again, this corner should be easy flat. Just maximize your usage. You can use all the curb here. And on the exit as well. No problems there. Should be easy flat. Just to recap, go through turn 2 again. There you go. Now, hairpin. This is a very, very tricky corner. Very tricky corner. What makes or breaks this corner is two things: your braking technique and having a solid braking reference. Having a solid braking reference at this corner is very difficult. So I tried a lot when I was testing to make 150 work. I tried a lot to make this work. It doesn't quite work. It is ever so slightly too late. Every time I tried to brake at 150, I would either slightly overshoot the apex, I'd get front or rear locking, and even the times where I did make the corner, I'd overloaded the tires on the entry and just had no traction on exit. So it just doesn't quite work. So what I have to do is brake at like 155, so slightly before 150. Again, it's quite annoying, 3 corners in a row without a specific reference, but at the end of the day, the perfect braking reference is going to very rarely line up exactly with a multiple of 50 meters. Yeah. So, 155 works quite well for me here. Shifting down to first gear for this corner, very slow corner. Obviously, you need first gear. I did experiment with using this curb, but again, it didn't work for me because the curb is at a slight angle to the rest of like the asphalt. And so whenever I tried to use it, all that happened was it compromised my braking efficiency. So there was, as much as I would love to open the track up and use all of the track available, in this case, it had, the time that I would gain by opening my entry a bit, I lost more than that through the lack of braking efficiency that it caused. Shifting down to first gear, it's sort of like a mid to late apex. And you want to be applying the throttle as you get to the apex, and I'm sort of like getting to half throttle, from the apex to here, getting to about half throttle, and then that last, when I'm going from half throttle to full throttle, I'm synchronizing that with straightening the steering wheel. So pay attention to that here. Full. See how as I squeeze the throttle, I was in sync with straightening the wheel. That's because if you're trying to turn too much and you hit the throttle like that, you'll just spin. So you really need to make sure that you're getting the car pointed as close to straight as possible to maximize your traction coming out. So again, to run through this corner. Also, notice how I delayed. I'm sort of under braking here as well. Another thing to keep in mind. Downshift as quick as you can, because you want to use the engine braking. But what you might notice here is I go 5th, 4th, 3rd as quick as I can, but then I delay the downshift to 2nd. Now, why did I do that? I delayed the downshift to 2nd because I could feel that the rears were starting to lock a bit. I was starting to get a little bit of rear locking. And if I'd continued to downshift as quick as I could, then I would have just introduced a bit of locking as well. And I would have exaggerated that rear locking, and it would have been a little bit of a disaster. So just listen to that. Listen to that and see if you can see what I mean. See how it's not a huge delay, but there's a slight delay between when it's 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. This is something you need to keep in mind of, because you are on the limit of you should be on the limit of braking here, and so you're going to have to pay attention to these. Maybe you have a little bit of front locking, or maybe you have a little bit of rear locking. You need to pay attention to these and adapt accordingly. So if you start to notice rear locking, delay your downshifts a bit so you don't make it worse. If you start to feel a bit of front locking, there's not a huge amount you can do other than just release the brakes a little bit, and just you might have to accept that you're going to miss the apex slightly and just adapt your line and point the car a bit more so that you're on the throttle earlier. You just have to pay attention to those things for this corner. So, next corner. My braking reference here is this blue here. So like the second blue part of the entry curb is my braking reference for this corner. Obviously, we're still in a position here where we're bringing the car from the left-hand side of the track to the right-hand side of the track. So it's really important to make sure that when you hit the brakes, you're keeping the steering wheel straight. Even if you're not quite all the way to the right, you don't want to be starting to try and turn while you're braking, because you'll just start to induce a lot of inside front locking. So make sure you're keeping the steering wheel straight. So watch here. Watch what I do. So I'm trying to maneuver the car as much as I can into a good position. But as soon as I hit the brakes, you'll see my steering wheel pulls straight. I'm pulling the steering wheel straight at the same time I hit the brakes, just to avoid any front locking. I've still got a little bit of steering lock on, but you can see it changes a little bit as I hit the brakes. So that's the braking reference. Braking reference here. Second blue sort of element of the entry curb. Shifting down to second gear, and make sure you use this curb as well. Make sure you use this entry curb. This you can use, and it helps. Even if you might slightly clip the grass here, and you'll feel like a very small amount of front locking, but as long as you don't overdo it, you'll be fine. And this extra bit of track actually helps you overall. So, see there, slightly clipping the grass there. They might have a tiny bit of front locking on the dash. No, it's okay in this situation actually. If you don't know, these lights here indicate locking. So when you're locking the fronts, they'll go purple. Like something like this, they'll go purple when you're locking the front, and this is like front right, front left. And when you're locking the rears, they'll go yellow like this. In case you didn't know, that's how you know if you're locking fronts or rears. If you can't feel it, it'll give you a visual indication as well. In terms of apex and general corner approach, so you don't want to be touching this orange curb. It's just too aggressive. But you do want to be using the blue and white curb here. And on exit, again, this is a corner where you only go sort of about 2/3 out. You don't want to go all the way out, because as much as you can go all the way out on the exit, what happens is it compromises your angle of attack for this next corner. I'm trying to find a camera angle that helps. Here we go. So yeah, so this corner, the ideal approach is 2/3. So you got sort of 2/3 of the track here and 1/3 of the track here. So 2/3 of the way out on the exit. Because what would happen if you used all of the room on the exit, you'd be perfectly fine through this corner, but you'd be compromising your angle of attack for this next corner. And what I mean by that is, if I zoom out a bit here, is, so the ideal line is, sorry, the ideal line is coming out of this corner 2/3 of the way across, cutting across this curb, and then following this next one. If you were all the way out on the edge, you know, coming in from here, then, well, you'd have to be turning more to the left to enter this corner and maximize your track usage, which then means you're making this right-hander, you're making it more of a corner for yourself. Yeah, so instead of, when you do it properly, you're approaching the corner like this. But if you were all the way out here on the previous corner, you'd have to be approaching like this. So it's about sort of linking these corners together and making sure that you're as fast as possible through the sequence of corners, as opposed to just one corner individually. So that's why you're only 2/3 of the way out on the exit. Okay, because you want to maximize your angle of attack for the next corner. Now the next corner on the entry, let me get rid of this dialogue here. Next corner on the entry, all of this curb, use all of it. Again, we want to maximize our track usage, use all the curb. But also, you want to be really early on throttle here. Again, common theme for this car is early on throttle everywhere. Because, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a compression in the track from about here to here. There's a compression. And you want to use that because that compression will give you a lot more grip as the car goes through it, because the car is being like pushed into the ground for the compression. And you can use that to your advantage by, as long as you're starting to apply throttle before you get to that, when you're in the compression, you can then start to hit full throttle and maximize your traction and your exit speed. So I'll try and, hopefully you can see what I mean as I play through the video, but just pay attention to that. There's the compression there. Watch it again. See that compression? Right now. Yep. And that ties in exactly with where I'm going to full throttle. See how I'm squeezing the throttle before? So I'm starting to apply the throttle already here. Already starting to apply the throttle. Again, well before I've got to the apex, because this car works well when you're applying the throttle early and really focusing on exit speeds. Like, more sort of, you should always focus on your exit speeds, but this car is like, takes it to the extreme. But that compression sort of around here where this green curb is, I'm leaning on the throttle when I get to that, leaning on the throttle, and as soon as I get to that, boom, grip, full throttle, maximum speed. Again, watch it again, because this is really important. See? So we'll just go through those sequence of corners again. See? Again, everything revolves around being early on throttle. Now, next corner. This corner is kind of like a half blind entry. It is quite tricky. I don't upshift to fifth for the entry simply because I'm lazy. No, the reason I don't upshift to fifth here is because, yes, I'm hitting the limiter in fourth, but if I'd upshifted to fifth, I'd have to downshift again to fourth. This is a fourth gear corner coming up. And the problem is, if I did that downshift, any downshift on corner entry has the risk of introducing instability. And for this high-speed corner, stability is king. You have to keep the car stable because that's how the aero platform works the best. So if yes, I'm hitting the limiter and I'm, maybe losing a couple of kilometers an hour before I get to the corner entry. But that's nothing compared to what I gain by keeping the car stable and quite simply just making life easier for myself. See, I'm nice and gentle on the pedals as well. It's all about keeping the car stable. Again, if I'd upshifted to fifth and had to downshift again to fourth, you can get rear locking. It's just not worth the hassle. So just stay in fourth here. Even if you hit the limiter, it's fine. Braking reference, it's quite tricky because you've just got white walls on either side. There's no markers, nothing. The only thing that I could think of to use as a braking reference is there is like a little kink here in the white line, about here, right? A very small kink in the white line. I don't know if you can see it, about there. That's not my braking reference. That's too late, but it's a bit before. Now, it's a bit before. Maybe 5 meters before that kink in the line. Now, you might go, okay, well, why don't you just use this big shadow here that's really obvious braking marker? Well, because shadows move. And as time progresses, this shadow is going to move, right? And you're going to be braking at a different place every lap. So never use shadows as braking references is the lesson there. It's just coincidence that the shadow's in the same spot. In terms of apex, what I'm imagining is I want the car to be sort of riding up on the curb here like this, inside wheels in the middle of the curb for the corner entry, and then I'm applying throttle from there. I also want to start applying the throttle about here, just after where the curb starts. Again, early throttle, and you want to drive through the corner with throttle. Again, high-speed corner, applying the throttle introduces stability. As long as you don't just jam the throttle and get wheel spin, that's obviously not the point. But using the throttle introduces stability, which is what you need in a high-speed corner. So that's how I'm imagining there. You want to use this curb on the inside, drive through the corner with the throttle, maximize your usage on the exit. Even if you slightly touch the gravel, it's still okay. All the way out, all the way to, you can see where the edge of the green curb is, all the way out to here, you're fine. Use all of it. Okay, so we'll just run through that corner again. So now for this corner, again, another corner, very hard to get an exact braking reference. So I imagine I'm braking about sort of 65 meters or so, about here. 60 meters, 60, 65. It's entirely possible to brake closer to the 50. It's entirely possible. The problem is, with these bank corners, you really want to sort of maximize the speed that you carry into it and hold through the banking. Now, if you brake later, sure, you'll be entering the corner faster. But you'll be carrying sort of the amount of speed in that you'll be carrying too much speed in, which means you'll start to move up and down the banking, which is just not the ideal way to use the banking in this corner. You want to be sort of at a consistent line, or semi-consistent line through the corner. By that I mean you don't want to sort of dive in, go up the banking, and then back down again. It doesn't work at this corner. It works at something like, so like Zandvoort turn 3, for example, you go in kind of on the inside and then go up to the top and then follow it around. The reason that works at Zandvoort is Zandvoort's banking it's not a consistent amount of banking. It's progressive. So it's less banked on the inside and gets increasingly banked, almost like the edge of a bowl up to the outside. That's why it works at Zandvoort. This corner is quite consistently banked. So you don't want to sort of be doing any sort of like fancy double apex stuff, or, you know, which is what you'd start to have to do to make the corner if you're braking too late. So again, braking about 60, 65. You don't want to over push the braking here. Again, it's a medium speed corner. You're shifting down to second gear. You don't want to overdo the braking. The key is carrying speed, not carrying entry speed in, but carrying speed through the corner. And again, as always with this car, making sure you're on throttle early. See, so if you watch that again, I'm coming in slightly off the apex, carrying that line round until I apply the throttle. And when I apply the throttle, I get a little kick from the rear, which helps me sort of hit a late-ish apex. What happens in this corner if you hit the apex too early? Like if I was already, I'm not down here, I'm like up here with the inside wheels. If I was already down here, yes, I'd be on the inside line, but the problem is when I then want to apply the throttle and the car does that little kick, I wouldn't have anywhere to go except up on the curb, which is not ideal. Because what you'll notice is this curb is sort of flat relative to the ground, and then you have the banking coming out like this. So anytime you're using this curb, you're basically just getting rid of the banking for yourself. The car goes from being sort of at this angle, and you have the banking giving you extra grip, to like this angle, which just doesn't work. I don't know why you wouldn't use it. You wouldn't voluntarily just give yourself less grip. So don't use this curb. It's a big no. Again, entering slightly off the curb, following that line round, so that you have the room to work with on the inside for when you want to apply the throttle. On the exit, use as much of that exit curb as you want. Just be mindful that it can, you can start to have a bit of wheel spin if you use too much, but it's, again, if you can use more of it and get away with it because of the line you take through the previous corner, then go for it. Just be mindful of the fact that the rear can become a little bit unsettled. Okay. Through here, cut this curb on the left as much as you can. Don't worry about the curb on the right. You don't want to hit this curb on the right because you want to be opening the entry up for, what is the second to last corner, the penultimate corner. So I'm going here so I can open the entry up. If you were over here, like you wanted to use this curb, then you'd actually have a tighter turn in. So just don't use it. It's not necessary. So use all of this. You want to be keeping the car as far left, basically, through this sequence. So left here, not using the apex because you want to have a nice turn in for the next corner. In terms of braking reference for the second to last corner, it's kind of tricky. Like, I imagine, so see this service road here? I'm imagining that I'm braking halfway along that. You're turning while braking, so just be mindful of that. You can't attack the brakes like normal. It's a relatively gentle brake. You don't want to overslow the car on the entry because, again, you need to be carrying some brakes into the corner to keep the nose down to help you turn. Down to third gear. Maybe you could go second. I wouldn't like that because then you're doing an extra downshift, then you have to upshift again, and I'd just hold third through here. Applying the throttle early. Well, not super early. Applying the throttle as you get to the apex. In between the two corners, you have two options. You can stay fully inside this curb. You know, there is enough grip here. You can stay fully inside. Just don't go too far out, because then you start to bump over this curb and you bump over this one, and it just unsettles the car a little bit too much. Plus, you start to have track limits issues. What I like to do is just like sort of sit on the curb in between the two. Like that. See, I'm just like leaning on the red curb. And then for this one, this is quite a tricky corner. Because if you sort of think, like, the left side tires have done a lot of work from here all the way around here. And so by the time you get to here, they're quite hot. And so you'll notice you just have this corner, you'll always have chronic understeer, just because, you know, it's at the end of a relatively long sequence of corners. And so you might need to jab the brake a little bit. You will need to try and induce a little bit of rotation just by slightly touching the brake. Use all of the inside curb, all of it. Again, early throttle. You know, look how early I'm applying the throttle here. Look how early I'm applying the throttle. So, slight jab of the brake, and then I'm already applying the throttle here. Like, I've barely turned in, and I'm already on the throttle. I'm basically already at full throttle by the time I get to the apex. You don't want to overpush it. You don't want to overpush the entry at all. You want to be driving through the corner with the throttle. Also, don't overpush the throttle on the exit here. See how I'm not even touching full throttle in between? Not even touching full throttle. I'm leaning on the throttle here. What would happen if I went full throttle in between? I'd scrub the front tires too much. They'd overheat, and I would have no turning. I just have no grip left for the last corner. It'd just be really... It's just like, you don't rush in between these two corners. Do not rush. You know, imagine it like you need to preserve the... Well, not even imagine. You do. You need to preserve the energy in the tires for the last turn in. Don't overpush them before you get to the last turn in. Yeah. See how it's like on the exit of penultimate corner, it looks like really under the limit. Just watch it again with me. It looks really under the limit because I'm preserving the tires for the last corner. And then I'm on the limit here. Again, all of the exit. Use all of the exit. You can go out to the gravel. That's fine. This is not track limits in iRacing, so that's fine. And in both these corners are third gear as well. So yeah, that's a circuit guide for you of Hockenheim. I'll give you a run through of the lap. This was a 1 minute 40.05. This lap. Here you go. So there you go. That's a lap. That's my guide. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll get back to you. I hope that's been helpful, and happy racing.